There's only a few of these that have come out. It's the latest development on math that actually seems to imply spirit. Curiously, okay, but still, let's work with the practical meta narratives working their way through the planet, and all of our politics and economics is based on the material plane, and that's what we all have to deal with every single day. That's the materialist meta narrative, and then there's what we think of as the second major meta narrative, which is our own subjective understanding of what our own personal life means, but that connects to the spiritual meta narrative, that connects to the idea that the whole thing is founded on spirit. What's the third meta narrative, Mike? The third meta narrative is the I'm going to call it the Jehovite evangelical, but all the single God theist meta narratives that say not only is it a foundation of presence and mind that goes through the evolution that the materialists have observed, but also there's a personality with masculine intentionality that's working its way through the actual reality of what we're all collectively experiencing. And that one clashes with both of the other ones. It clashes with it clashes even with the one of spirit. And they try to, there's a confusion, and I'm calling this out because people try to blur it over, between God as defined by Jehovah, an actual personality that's above the material plane and has some kind of a intentionality with respect to the material plane and influence on it. Let's just leave it right there for that. As far as what he can do, beyond the other claims evangelicals have about him, that clashes with the Buddhist perspective, and Buddhist is generic for the one mind, belief in foundation, energy of presence, which is subjective, that part. It clashes with that, and it clashes even more with the materialist side. Because, we're going to leave the material side as separate from, because the material as a meta context has to be honored in our economics and in our politics and in our science. But in terms of what that means, that's where it gets, if you just stay with the material, you end up with postmodernism, which leaves you clueless as to what the hell you're actually doing and opens up to all kinds of nefarious bullshit. But here's the thing. Even from the Buddhist, the Jehovite single God thing clashes with those two other meta contexts. And you have this, because it seems like toxic masculinity. Yes? The two, without the Jehovah, you're beginning to have kind of like a compromise between spirit and materialism. And you get things like it's a benevolent cosmos. But you don't go all the way to the Jehovite claim that it's an intentionally evolving towards perfection. And perfection is just perfection sounds like a static term. Perfection means more like evolving towards really gorgeous, intentionally getting better. Eh? You call out, perfection is an abstract term that in terms of living, it doesn't mean anything more than like, that was nice. And everything nicer and everything better understood and responding to the needs of being here as a subjective presence. So where the hell did Jehovah come from? And you can't, it's not logical. But you can visualize possibilities in which that arises from the one mind. The one mind being the collective presence that doesn't separate out into individual presence that essentially we're all from. There's clashes between the Jehovite perspective and the Buddhist perspective, because the Jehovite perspective, I think, goes overboard, suggesting that intentionality is the source of our very being, except that could work in the three-sided unification of the meta context. How abstract can you get? What I was going to try to as part of the introduction is that This being, let's call it the 13th or more iteration of the same storyline, which goes from a metaphysical vision of how these metacontexts merge and merge in a healing way that allows for them to work out, because each one of them separately and individually has major flaws. When you add all three of them in, they correct, and it's a seemingly paradoxical, but it functions. And the whole material plane, as per my vision, is based on a three-sided paradox. There are paradoxes that do not function, like infinite regression. That's, if you leave the Jehovahite creating things, that's an infinite regression that has no starting point. But there are paradoxes that do function. 0 equals 1 equals infinity. And but my point about this introduction is that it comes back to what's happening right now on planet Earth. There's three different ways of looking at it, but they all, from these three meta contexts, each one of them points to right now is a moment of transition and crisis. And depending on which one, and to what extent we need to be involved, there's different levels of perspective on that. Each one of them separately seems like a really harsh possibility. I mean, even the heaven on earth from the Jehovahite side is a judgment day that involves a lot of pain. From the materialists, we really have to deal with all this ecological overshoot. From the Buddhist side, what we're expecting to transcend all these material problems. Yeah, we can all become Buddhists and it doesn't matter anymore, but that's a really piss poor solution to a collective crisis, which is a collective opportunity to get to some higher wisdom. When you add in intentional evolution, now evolution from the material plane, but it's directed both from within and from the spirit side. All three of these meta contexts remain perfectly valid and have to be dealt with on their own terms. From the Buddhist side, it's a good idea to develop your own personal connection to the one mind and the one spirit. The evangelical side would have you just follow the rules. It works that way too, but it's enhanced by having your own groundedness in essentially yoga, Buddhist meditation techniques. According to the meditation techniques, you can reach understanding of spirit by working on what's handed to you by the material plane, and you get to an understanding of greater spirit. But to get to the understanding of a one mind intentionality that's driving this whole thing forward, and it's not a stasis that we have to separate from the material plane to reach resolution. The whole thing's moving forward towards greater flow and matching its source, which is presence. And it's complicated in a way that makes it joyous and meaningful in living. So that's ecology. Almost the complication is the material perspective. From the mental perspectives and the emotional perspectives, there's another three. The Jehovahite side perhaps pulls in with your heart. It's a way to get there with your heart, but that's our true center also. This gets all complex. It can be explained in simple terms. It comes back to things we can do on the ground to assist in the transition. Things we can begin to understand more coherently that keeps us from being too defensive. There's a way that all three of these perspectives work together, and there's a way that they work, and to explain how they don't work when they're separated. And that's kind of a crisis we're in. We're at a moment where it's both an opportunity to understand and also an opportunity to get it right on full transcendent levels. What a wild splurge of metaphysical weirdness that was. But it's all real, babies.